Many of our viewers, when reading the name, might wonder if Your Excellency is of any Lebanese or Levantine origin. Would you care to share that with us?
Yeah, my father is Lebanese.
And he has been, he migrated to...
Yes, he immigrated to Germany, and I was born and raised and grew up in Germany, and became a German diplomat. And now I'm back in Lebanon.
French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian visited Beirut and met with officials, but also he met with what was seen as a gesture of support with various activists and movements that presents themselves as alternative movement. Does this represent or reflect a French endeavor, or does it represent or reflect a European vision of supporting these alternative groups?
Well, I think we agree that a prosperous and thriving democracy lives from those who are decision makers, and they are decision makers for a limited period of time, as long as they're elected, and those who are outside the decision making and who represent opposition. So for a democracy, opposition is vital and opposition is important. Also to bring new thinking into the political system, to bring alternatives that people can choose. That is the essence of democracy. And I think it is normal and rational that when somebody comes visit, that he tries to, of course, seize the spectrum, the political spectrum which exists in a country. And for that matter, Lebanon has a long democratic tradition compared to other states in the region, we should be proud of.
But within the latest efforts exerted by France and the European Union of actually trying to pressure to form a government, could the EU or France go further and offer support, no matter what this support could be, to these movements and activists that present themselves as an alternative? And if there was a support given, how could it be given, by the EU or the French state?
Yeah. Well, I cannot speak for the French. The French can speak for themselves, and I think they do that very well. I can just speak for what happens within the framework of the European Union. And our focus is to support the state institutions to deliver on what they are supposed to deliver on: services for the citizens, security, an infrastructure in which economic activity can take place, basic services like water, electricity, healthcare, wastewater treatment, solid waste treatment, all these kind of things. And this is the focus of our cooperation with Lebanon, and this is the focus of our what we do in this country. We have, of course, discussions with all sorts of political actors in Lebanon. We support civil society organizations, because very often it is a good thing if they start organizing themselves, but I'm not aware that the European Union gives any kind of material or other support to political groups in this country. This is not the policy of the European Union.
Before this interview, EU Foreign Minister Josep Borrell had what we can describe as a strong announcement, and he announced that the EU shall start adopting a carrot and a stick policy in order to exert more pressure towards the formation of a government and implementation of reforms. First, do you have any comment about this expression that was used? And second, should any sticks be used in order to pressure the Lebanese political class? Could you share with us what kind of sticks could be used?
Well, we're currently in Brussels debating various policy options which we can use together with Lebanese decision makers to support Lebanon in a very difficult situation. There is a whole range of options which are discussed, starting by renewing our partnership, where we want to renegotiate our partnership priorities. There is currently, for the whole region, southern neighborhood region, like we call it, discussion about large-scale investments and support to revitalize the economies affected by the COVID crisis. There is a whole package of different policy options discussed. In this context, there has also been introduced the notion of measures of a punitive nature against those who obstruct the political process or those who hinder important political reforms to take place. Now, the government formation in Lebanon is just one step. It's an important step. But it's certainly not the end of the road. It's not that if you have a government tomorrow, all the problems of Lebanon will be resolved. The major issue in Lebanon is a very deep economic crisis. Let's not forget that Lebanon defaulted on its sovereign debt last year in March. And ever since, we have not really seen a major progress of how to redress this economic crisis. In the meantime, the Lebanese population is impoverished. They are losing their deposits in the banks. And there is practically nothing done in Lebanon to properly address this huge challenge. It's a challenge for Lebanon and for the Lebanese people in the first place. In order to be able to help and support Lebanon in this crisis, we first need to see some very specific measures taken by the Lebanese decision makers in order to be able to do that. One of them is the formation of a government, because one of the major problems right now in Lebanon is that you do not have an entity which is mandated to take decisions for everybody. You have different political actors who are blocking themselves, who are blocking each other, and you don't see any progress on issues to address the economic crisis, or also to negotiate with the creditors of how this debt which has been accumulated and which was not serviced last year, how it shall be dealt with. We do not see progress on these things, and you have to address these issues. You cannot just leave them unaddressed.
When talking about reforms, one cannot but remember a very specific law that was actually presented or asked to be presented after a partnership, economic partnership between Lebanon and the European Union. And this law was to actually to abolish all sorts of exclusive brands and agencies, which was implemented in 2003. And the law was written and it was supposed to be implemented, but the law is still in the drawers till this day. We're talking about 18 years.
Well, we cannot afford the luxury of giving up hope. We have to continue to try to do the right thing together with our Lebanese partners. We cannot do that on our own. I think today it is important to differentiate two types of reforms we're discussing. And they're very specific. The first type of reform is something which has been put together by the International Monetary Fund, who was here to start discussing with the Lebanese authorities about a possible program at some point in order to get out of the economic danger zone. They left behind a booklet of homework which needs to be done by Lebanon, and not just the government. The parliament needs to play its role, and other state institutions as well. These reforms include the passing of a capital control law, a banking sector reform, unifying the exchange rate, and other measures which are more in the financial and monetary system. The problem is, if you do not do these measures, you will not be able to access international financial markets anymore. You can, of course, choose not to do these kind of things. And that's a sovereign Lebanese decision. But if you want to access funds by the International Monetary Fund, and if you want to access international financial markets again, you need to go down this path. The second part of reforms are what we call more the governance reform, which means how the affairs of the state are dealt with. For that, we have a number of very important laws which are in Parliament and debated right now, and which we have supported to rationalize, if you want, the way how in Lebanon the state deals with certain things. There is a law on public procurement, for example, or a law to strengthen the independence of the judiciary, and other laws which have not been acted upon. There is a very famous law, for example, in the electricity sector which has been passed in the year 2003, which came at the moment when all over the world there were liberalizations of the electricity sector. This law has been passed, it's in effect, but it's never been implemented properly. So these are things of how you deal, basically, how you organize the affairs of the state in order to improve accountability, to reduce corruption and other issues. And we are just encouraging the Lebanese decision makers to make progress on these things. We don't have another option than to tell them, this is what we could suggest to you if you want to improve your system, and if you want to avoid the hardship for your people they are going through right now. It is very difficult to make progress on these issues, but that doesn't mean that progress is not necessary.
Lebanon and the political class has always dealt with these requests, with the European request and the international community's request to implement reforms, especially whenever the system was faced with a possibility of a collapse in 2001, 2002. And so in order to get the proper finance, in order to stand on its feet, the Lebanese political class always dealt with these requests in a way that, okay, we will write them these laws and put them on the table just so they can see it and give us the money.
That the assessment is not very fair. I think our position has been and continues to be, we can suggest things to be done which we find rational from where we come from. And then it's up to the Lebanese decision makers in their sovereign decision to implement these things or not. But of course, there are certain things you cannot do in a context like Lebanon. And you will have seen that in the last couple of years, there is less and less investment by the international community, by international donors, into the infrastructure of the country. Electricity infrastructure, water infrastructure, wastewater, solid waste, and so on and so forth. We have tried, and we have tried all the time. It came as a package with suggestions on how to improve the governance of the sector and also to build up the infrastructure. We did not make much progress. The result of that is that the investment in the infrastructure is going back in Lebanon, and that is very bad for the economy, because that has huge negative effects in the economy if you don't trigger these investments, because these investments into infrastructure actually contribute to economic growth, contribute to creating jobs and all the other things. It's the responsibility at the end of the day of the Lebanese decision makers, whether they actually want to go there or whether they do not want to go there. There are other economic models which are being debated, and some Lebanese decision makers say they think it's not a good idea to go to the IMF. Well, I think that they should then say what the alternative is, because what we're seeing right now is an implosion of the economic system which goes at the expenses of the Lebanese population. And the Lebanese decision makers are accountable to their people and not to us.
So the EU's vision is definitely go back to the path of the IMF.
I would say in the situation in which Lebanon is currently, there is no alternative to the IMF. And I don't know anybody who has real weight in the system who says that there is an alternative to it. Because you need to clean the books, you need to address the issue of the debts, you need to try to access liquidity again, and it's not that there is so many opportunities to do so. So I would say for the time being, but that's our perception, Lebanese might differ, that it would be beneficial for Lebanon if they started serious negotiations with the IMF.
It is obvious that there has been a division within the EU circles concerning the punitive measures that could be taken against Lebanese officials. And this division has been reflected very clearly by the visit of Hungarian Foreign Minister to Lebanon. First, I would like to ask you, many observers found it, to say the least, weird that a foreign minister held a joint press conference with a Lebanese official and defended measures that are being discussed in the EU, such as implementing sanctions. Is there any initiative by the EU to unify its position? Because obviously there is division within the EU foreign ministers.
Well, the European Union has always lived with differences of opinion, and I think that this is not a drama, because that makes us strong at the end of the day. It's always good to compare different visions. At the end of the day, I'm confident that we will be able to put something on the table. A process has started, and this process has not started 5 months ago. The process has started a couple of weeks ago, where we internally start to discuss issues. One thing is clear. If we create an instrument which will enable the European Union to impose sanctions on Lebanese decision makers, it needs to be a very solid legal instrument which finds the consensus of the European Union member states. I think that this is possible, but it's not an easy thing. Currently there is this discussion in Brussels. There will be something which comes out of it. Again, we are not keen to impose sanctions for the sake of imposing sanctions. We hope that this is a contribution to mobilize the political energy in Lebanon to work towards constructive solutions. And these need to be Lebanese solutions. They will not come from outside.
You have recently celebrated the Day of Unity and Peace in Europe. Do you expect 5 years from now or 10 years from now to be still celebrating this day with all the secessionist demands that has been going on in Europe?
Absolutely. Europe is stronger than you believe. And I think we will see that the project, the European project of unifying the continent, is an extremely positive contribution for the continent. People forget what Europe is about. My kids, if I was not living here, they would not know what a passport is. They can just go wherever they want in Europe, start a new life. They have the same currency everywhere. They have friends all over the place. They speak a number of languages. I know this is a specialty of Lebanon as well. But they are living in a borderless world, and they're enjoying all the benefits of this. This is taken for granted today. It is not in today's world at all. We have a common market. We have banned the prospect of violent conflict in Europe and banned it for good. These are major historical achievements. We are also able to mobilize large amounts of funds for new projects. Like the newest project is to make the economy more green, to go into a more digital economy. We're not the front runners in all these aspects, but we find a way to organize ourselves in a way that we deliver at the end of the day. If you look at the infrastructure, the public infrastructure in Europe, it is better than anywhere else in the world, including in very rich countries outside Europe, because there is a lot of public investment into infrastructure, into education, into healthcare and other issues. Europe is a continent where the standards of living and where the possibilities of personal growth are unparalleled worldwide. I'm convinced of the European Union.
Since you are of Lebanese origins, would you suggest that the solution for the Arab region would be similar to the solution that has been going on for more than half a century in Europe, a unified Arab world, regardless of what unity means?
I think that certainly there would be benefits from better regional cooperation instead of thriving on conflicts. For sure, this is the essence and the heart of the European project, that you acknowledge the diversity, but you still work together. And that used to be actually also the promise of Lebanon, if I remember correctly, that you acknowledge the diversity, but you still work together. And yet you create something which is new and which gives everybody the opportunity to live their lives. And it's not about unifying everything, it's about creating a common platform.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.